you guys? The Curious Owl here, and today I have my November 2022 wrap-up. So as many of you know, November was a bit of a crazy month for me. I started a brand new job, and that came with a whole new routine that I am still getting used to. So my reading did suffer a little bit this past month, but I feel like that is okay for me right now because with every new chapter that comes around usually comes some kinds of hardships, and for me that has been through reading, and that's been mainly because I just don't have as much time in my day to get through books as I did with my previous job, because with working from home I could listen to audiobooks pretty much all day and take more breaks during work, whereas now I am in a physical environment for my job, and I have a customer service kind of job in a sense where I'm a receptionist, and so that does require more attention to the office where I can't really sit and read as much. I'm trying to really take some time in my day to try to read a little bit more, and that usually is by listening to an audiobook on my drives to and from work. And during my lunch break, about 4 times a week, I am able to come home so that I can take out Oscar and take him on a walk, and usually in that hour time frame I can get through more of my audiobook as I drive home, take him on his walk, eat my lunch, and then go back to work. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do, and then in the evenings trying to read as much as I can as well, with, you know, still taking care of Oscar and hanging out with my husband and whatever else is going on. So trying my best, but this month did kind of slip away from me because of that. But I had a really good month despite that. I read some really good things, and I'm very excited for how things are going to go in December. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the books I did complete in November. In November, I only read 5 books, which doesn't seem like a lot, but the page count was actually pretty close to what I normally do, because I did have one large book that took me a while, and then another large book that I started off the month with that did take me some time as well. So it ultimately ended up being pretty normal in terms of page count for me. I just didn't read as many like physical books by themselves. But I did get through a total of 2,961 pages this month and 0 minutes worth of audiobooks. I read 1 physical book and 4 ebooks this month, no audiobooks, and all of the books I read this month were from my personal library, either physically or through my Kindle. Star ratings, I had 2 5-stars this month, 1 4-star, and 2 3-stars. So even though I didn't also read that many books, I did still have some pretty good reads this month. The first of which being Upon a Burning Throne by Ashok K. Banker. This is a high fantasy story, the first book, and I believe a trilogy that is called the Burnt Empire Saga. This was the Royally Booked Book Club pick for the months of October and November, which now is a bi-monthly book club. This is basically following a set of twins who are the crown princes of this kingdom that is very Hindu inspired, and essentially this whole story is talking about from their birth all the way up to when they are fully grown adults and there is an outbreak of war going on. In the very beginning of the novel, we find out that when the twins are being looked at as possible rulers and they're going through this testing that all children that are in line for the throne go through to determine whether or not they're actually viable for the throne, there is a third child that's brought up by the exiled uncle of these 2 boys, and he is claiming that his daughter has just as much right to the throne as the 2 boys. But the problem with being exiled is that that kind of essentially denotes anyone that he has even as a child, because of the fact that it is from his line. So his daughter wouldn't really be able to rule even if she was viable for the throne. Starts basically an impending war with this kingdom where this man who very much has demonic-like entities, he's very magical, very mystical, he starts on this campaign to take down this entire empire, which includes the 2 boys that are in this story. There's a lot more going on. Other than that, there's a lot more things going on with the boys as they get older, but I don't want to talk about too much without spoiling it. But that's basically the whole crux of the story, or at least the first novel, is that these boys are basically trying to continuously fight off this war that's threatening to go on. And then there's all other kinds of political intrigue, there's other kinds of political backstabbing that happens, and there is a lot of information dug up about the myths and the gods and things like that that are at play in this story as well. This is a very very political fantasy though, this does have a lot of magical aspects involved in it, and like I said, there are gods at play in this, but they are at a much lower level than the political intrigue of the story is, and I do think that that caused me to get a little lost here and there with this book, but I really enjoyed it, and I really would like to read the rest of the series, especially because a personal friend of mine read this series and really enjoyed it, and she thought I would really like it too, so I am looking forward to reading the other 2 books in this series, and hopefully more from Ashok, because I really like the style of writing. I think that he has got a very beautiful way with creating worlds and creating characters. Like, there was not really too many characters that I disliked, just basically because of the writing of those characters. So I was pretty impressed, but I did give this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I ended up reading was Spinning by Tillie Walden. This was one of the 2 books I had to read for the Wheel of D20 for this month. This book completed a prompt that I got from my friend Becca's Animal Crossing TBR game for the prompt Jock, which was to read a book with sports in it. I have all my thoughts on this book in my Wheel of D20 video, but to keep it short and simple, this was fine for a graphic novel. It's a memoir graphic novel, and I just didn't really care for the structure, really. I feel that there was a lot of very disjointed parts of this that I would have preferred to be a little bit more chronological and linear as opposed to the very disjointed nature that there was. The next book that I read was one of my favorites from this month, and it was Yerba Buena by Lacour. This was my other book I got to read for the Wheel of D20 this month, which was for the food prompt, basically, for the Animal Crossing TBR game. It was for the lazy character, which was to read a book that involved food. Again, this is in my Wheel of D20 video, but I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I think that Lacour is going to be one of my more favorite authors from here on out because I just love this story so much. It's so beautifully done, and it talks about so many things in terms of growing up, and especially growing up in environments that are very different from each other, and how 2 people who come from incredibly different worlds can still find a lot of common ground and understanding with each other. And there's a lot about this that is just filled with love and care, and it's just one of those stories I'm going to be gushing about for months to come, and I immediately wanted to reread this as soon as I was done. This, by far, is one of my top 10 favorite books of the year so far. I can tell you that for certain. The next book was another 5-star, which was Lacour by Anna Marie McLemore. This is Anna Marie's newest book that came out earlier this year. Another book on my anticipated reads list. I loved this so much. I really liked reading Anna Marie McLemore's other book, which was Blanca and Roja. I really liked that one a lot. This one was so good too. This one deals with a set of kids. There are 2 non-binary kids in this story, and they both grow up in the same area, and they both are the only people able in this town to see what is called Under the Lake, and it's basically what they describe as being like this otherworldly thing under the lake of this town. And this town has a lot of history behind it in terms of the issues surrounding around racism and homophobia and transphobia and those kinds of things. But this is a story about 2 kids who are looking to find themselves, and they meet thinking that they are never going to fully understand each other in a lot of ways, but find that through the unknown aspects of their relationship and as they're figuring each other out, there's a lot of things about themselves that they still have to really work on. This is a story that I think really emphasizes the fact that when you are struggling with something, you are not always alone. We have one character who is trans and considers themselves also non-binary and is dealing with the fact that they have ADHD, and the other one, also being non-binary, is dealing with the fact that they have dyslexia. And while those 2 things are very different from each other, there is again some common ground in this story that is being developed in terms of the struggles that they face and the fear that there is with living with these things and never reaching the full potential that other people set for them. And this idea of the lake, I think, becomes much more of a metaphor as opposed to an actual place. So go into it with that mindset. This is very much a magically realistic story, which is very known in terms of how Anna Marie McLemore writes. It is something that, from what I understand in all of their books, is something that is a very common thing, because magical realism, if you do not know, is a Latinx device of storytelling. And Anna Marie themselves, being Latinx, uses this thing very often, this magical realistic thing. It was the same thing in Blanca and Roja. to some extent, and I think that this is something that they rely heavily on because it is a very beautiful way of storytelling that I think for most people it would be hard to guess right off the bat, but the more that you learn about what magical realism is and you learn that there is a lot of metaphor to be used in magical realism, it is something that I think a lot of people will end up enjoying once they kind of understand the nuances that are involved with that kind of thing. But I absolutely love this. I love the story. I love the characters. I love the reveals for the characters themselves about their identities and the things that they hate about themselves, that they actually love about themselves, that get brought up in this story. It was just beautiful from beginning to end, and I don't think it's in my top 10 per se, but I definitely am going to be reading more of Anna Marie McLemore's books because I just love the way that they write. And the final book that was not as great as I had wanted it to be, which is par for the course with this series, is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, the third book in the Stormlight Archive series. Why I am still reading this series, despite the fact that I'm not really enjoying it, is beyond me. All of the books have got 3 stars at this point, so at least I'm enjoying it for the most part. There are a lot of elements in this series that I am liking. Shalon, she's my favorite character in this entire series, but I just have so many issues with this series, especially with the length of the books. And I was talking to Bree, who is one of the hosts for the Brandon Sanderson read-along I've been a part of for the last several months, is that when it comes to this series, I feel the same way about it as I did with the Wheel of Time series after a certain point. The plot becomes so complicated, and I really don't know where all the characters are after a certain time that it becomes very hard for me to really piece the story together. And I got to that point in the Wheel of Time about around book 3 or 4, and is one of the reasons why I stopped reading that series, and I'm feeling the same thing with this. So I think that one of the things I'm learning about myself is that extremely high fantasy books like the Stormlight Archive and like the Wheel of Time are stories that I am just not capable in this part of my life handling right now because of the complex plots, the length of the books, which is already by itself very intimidating, and the fact that I think that there is so much political based things going on besides just the magic that it's very hard for me to sift through. Again, also reminding me of the time I was reading the Game of Thrones series where at some point I got really lost with what the whole point of all the political stuff was about and whether certain characters were in certain places or if we were following other characters. It's just been a very confusing time for me reading this series, but I do see the value in it and I do understand the point that this is the series that bridges all of the Cosmere together, so I do appreciate it. I am very interested in reading Rhythm of War next month to finally round out the entire Cosmere read-along that I've been doing with Bree and Brandy, and I am very excited to be able to put this series behind me and say that I've read it. But whether or not I could tell you what the hell the story is about, no, there's no way. So with that, those are the books I ended up reading in the month of November. Again, a bit of a shorter list than the last several months, but I am so proud of the fact that I got through these 2 big chunky fantasies by themselves, and I got to read 2 of my most anticipated reads for the year of 2022 in this past month, and I'm very excited for how December is going to go. It's already getting off to a pretty decent start, I will say. So I'm very excited to see what the rest of the year has in store for me. But thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already and you'd like to be and would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!